federal judge yesterday ordered the Justice Department to unredact additional pages of the Epstein files, concluding that, quote, the Attorney General has violated the Epstein Act by redacting the names of senders and recipients in at least 8 email exchanges with Mr. Epstein regarding a torture video and sexual activity with young women, including minors. Joining our conversation right now is former federal prosecutor Brendan Ballou, who represents Katie Phang. Katie Phang is the independent journalist who filed the suit, and good for her for doing so. So, Brendan, the Justice Department now has until July 2nd to either turn over these documents or explain why the redactions should not be unredacted. Are you expecting to see the files, or are you gearing up for a bigger battle?
Well, Stanley Woodward, the number 3 Justice Department official, just entered a notice of appearance in our case. So we expect that they are really freaked out right now, because it's more than just the redactions. You know, there are the specific emails where you're talking about, as you said, torture videos, potentially sex with minor women, where the names of the senders and recipients have been redacted. But there's also the fact that there are documents related to Donald Trump that were never produced in the first place. There are issues with the fact that this is a case, an investigation that spanned multiple countries internationally. The Department of Justice categorically.
All right, people. Jack speaking. There's something you should know. Federal judges are reviewing raw, unredacted documents in secure rooms, files that could reshape the political landscape. The complete records, with every name and connection intact, reveal what some public figures have long claimed they had nothing to hide. The irony is staggering. While everyone's attention is pulled in 1,000 different directions by the chaos of the daily news cycle, the real story is being read quietly in judges' chambers and congressional secure rooms. It's being analyzed by investigators who don't appear on cable news. It's being discussed in whispered conversations between officials who understand the weight of what they're seeing.
Did not review documents that weren't in the English language. They just said that they didn't do it. And then on top of that, the redactions that they did make, they didn't explain, which they were required to do by law. So, you know, Judge Sullivan issued a preliminary injunction granting everything that we and Katie Phang requested and rejecting every single argument that the Department of Justice made here.
Why does Katie Phang want to see the unredacted versions of these particular files? Not faulting her at all. Yeah. Good for her. Great journalism. Good for her for subpoenaing it. But there's like 3 million files still missing. Also, like there's so many things. What is it about these files?
These are, you know, as you said, there are millions of documents at issue here. When you're going for a preliminary injunction, it's really important to focus on the things where it is just obvious. It's indisputable that the government is violating the law here. And the important thing is, in their defense, the government didn't even try to argue that it was following the law. They just argued on standing here. And so, you know, these are cases where it's so clear that there is potential wrongdoing here, that these are not the names of victims or minors. These are the names of potential co-conspirators, potential perpetrators.
And at the center of it all, like a gravitational pull that cannot be escaped, is the same name that has dominated American politics for nearly a decade: Donald Trump. This isn't speculation. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is what happens when the legal system actually works the way it's supposed to, when judges demand to see the real evidence, and when lawmakers who have access to classified material start speaking out about what they've witnessed behind closed doors. The Epstein files have become the focal point of a battle between transparency and secrecy, between protecting victims and protecting the powerful, between telling the public the truth and carefully managing what the public is allowed to know.
They need to get
right, but as you note, in their previous release of about half of the documents that they're under law supposed to have released by a long time ago, they redacted the names of possible perpetrators and did not redact the names of victims and survivors. Again, contrary to the law. Are you worried at all about that happening with these files?
Only if the Department of Justice is actively malicious and tries to punish victims here by releasing names. You know, it is obvious here that the names that are at issue are the names of perpetrators or people in Jeffrey Epstein's orbits, not victims. And if in the incredibly unusual case that they are victims, Judge Sullivan has given them a chance to say as much and explain why they can't produce that. So they have the chance to do that.
A billionaire investor with ties to Jeffrey Epstein is being deposed amid the ongoing House Oversight Committee investigation into the dead pedophile and his evil web. Leon Black, the former head of private equity firm Apollo Global Management, Sat today for a closed-door interview on Capitol Hill about his relationship with Epstein. Lawmakers say Black declined to answer questions.
Here's what we know for certain. A federal judge in New York just forced the Justice Department to fix what he publicly described as serious redaction errors. Let that sink in for a moment. A federal judge, someone who sits above the political fray and is supposed to be impartial, had to step in and order the Department of Justice to correct its handling of one of the most sensitive document releases in recent memory. The DOJ, the agency responsible for protecting crime victims and managing classified evidence, had screwed up so badly that victim names and images were accidentally exposed to the public. This wasn't a small mistake. This was a systemic failure that required judicial intervention to fix. Judge Richard Berman was not pleased. He called out the government's incompetence in no uncertain terms.
About non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, and that's when the chairman of the committee, James Comer, made this move.
I have just issued 2 subpoenas to Mr. Black. The NDAs are between him and other women. We want to know, was Jeffrey Epstein involved in the NDAs? Was he involved in writing? Was he involved in awarding funds to the women for the NDAs? What was the reason for the NDAs? We want to know everything about the NDAs.
It's hard to overstate just how significant it is that a Republican chairman of this committee made that announcement to issue 2 subpoenas. That is a big deal. Leon Black apparently expressed regret about his dealings with the late sex offender in a letter to investors in 2020 after a New York Times report alleged, quote, the 2 men often socialized and dined together, and Mr. Black was a lucrative client for Mr. Epstein over the final decade of his life, unquote. Black then stepped away from Apollo in 2021. An internal investigation by the company found no wrongdoing. That probe ultimately concluded Black's payments to Epstein totaled $158 million.
He made them go back and do their job correctly. And then he canceled a scheduled hearing because finally, after the court got involved, the DOJ actually started handling things the way they should have from the beginning. But here's where this story takes a turn that should make every American sit up and pay attention. On February 9th, 2 members of Congress from opposite sides of the aisle went on CNN and dropped a bombshell that has been largely buried in the news cycle. Congressman Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, and Congressman Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, had both reviewed the full unredacted Epstein files in a secure congressional setting. These are 2 men who disagree on almost everything politically.
Between 2012 and 2017, Black is one of the rare witnesses that the House panel has talked to who have faced allegations of abusing women in connection with Epstein. One woman told the FBI that Black became sexual in a massage Epstein had directed her to give him. A separate woman alleged that Black had raped her in 2014 and described going to Epstein's Florida house with Black, where she says she was told she would have sex with Epstein. An attorney for Leon Black tells CNN he has never, quote, abused, assaulted, or raped, unquote, any girl or woman, and calls the allegations, quote, completely false. Black has categorically denied any wrongdoing and knowledge of Epstein's crimes. In his opening statement to the Oversight Committee, he said, quote, I have never abused a woman. I have never been with an underage woman. I have never engaged in sex trafficking. I have never paid Epstein for access to women. I was never blackmailed by Epstein. I was not involved with and had no knowledge of any of Epstein's heinous conduct, unquote. What do you make of Chairman Comer's announcement that the committee is going to issue 2 subpoenas for Leon Black? And did he earn those subpoenas by not really testifying and cooperating?
Agree 100% with Chairman Comer. You know, we were in the first hour of what we expected to be a multi-hour interview with Mr. Black as soon as questions came up about the NDAs. And it's important to note, the NDAs are a result.
They come from different parties. They represent different parts of the country. They have different constituencies and different priorities. But when they sat down in that secure room and read through the raw, unfiltered documents, they both came to the exact same conclusion. At least half a dozen powerful men are being shielded by over-redactions. The public is not getting the full story, not even close. Let's think about what that means. These lawmakers are telling us, in their own words, that there are at least 6 individuals with enough power and influence to warrant special protection from the Justice Department. Their names are being kept out of public view. Their connections to Epstein are being hidden behind black bars. Their potential crimes, if any, are being obscured from the American people. And the only people who get to see the complete picture are the judges, the prosecutors, and a handful of lawmakers with the right security clearances. Meanwhile, the rest of us are left to piece together fragments of information from heavily edited documents and press releases designed to manage public perception. The timing of all this is curious, to say the least. The Justice Department just published around 3.5 million pages from the Epstein files. 3.5 million. That's not a number our brains can easily process. That's a mountain of paper. That's a collection of documents so vast that nobody, absolutely nobody, is going to read all of it. And buried somewhere in that avalanche of information, carefully placed in the DOJ's press release, is a warning that should make anyone with an interest in transparency deeply uncomfortable. The government explicitly stated that some of these documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims about President Trump that were allegedly submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election. Think about what's happening here. The Justice Department is acknowledging that accusations against Trump exist in these files. They're telling us that some of these accusations are fabricated, but they're not telling us which accusations are false. They're not identifying which documents are sensationalist. They're not providing any context that would help the public separate truth from fiction. They're just dumping millions of pages on the public with a vague disclaimer and hoping nobody looks too closely. It's a classic maneuver. Put out so much information that nobody can possibly process it all. Include a carefully worded warning that undermines the credibility of any damaging claims. And then let the media and the public fight over what it all means, while the real questions remain unanswered. This is the game that's being played, and it's a dangerous one, because when the government controls the information flow, when they decide what we see and what we don't see, when they label some claims true and others sensationalist without providing any basis for those distinctions, they're not just managing a document release. They're managing a narrative. And the narrative is the most powerful weapon in modern politics. The redaction system itself is supposed to serve legitimate purposes. Protecting the identities of crime victims is absolutely essential. We can all agree on that. Victims of sexual abuse and exploitation deserve privacy. They deserve to be shielded from public scrutiny when they've already suffered so much. Similarly, protecting classified intelligence sources and methods is necessary for national security. We can't have our intelligence agencies exposing their sources to the world. That would compromise our ability to gather information and prevent future attacks. These are valid, reasonable justifications for keeping certain information out of the public eye. But here's the problem. The same redaction system that protects victims and sources can also be used to protect the powerful. When you see a black bar covering a name, you have no way of knowing whether that name belongs to a victim who deserves privacy or a perpetrator who deserves exposure. You have no way of knowing whether that redaction is there to protect someone who has suffered abuse or someone who has committed abuse. You have no way of knowing whether the system is working the way it's supposed to or whether it's been corrupted by power and influence. That's the fundamental flaw in the entire process. The secrecy is absolute. And we're just supposed to trust that the people behind those black bars are making the right decisions. But here's the thing about trust. It has to be earned. And the Justice Department has done very little to earn it in this case. They publicly admitted that they botched the redactions so badly that victim names and images were exposed. They had to be forced by a federal judge to fix their mistakes. They're being called out by members of Congress from both parties for protecting powerful people. And yet, we're supposed to believe that everything else is being handled properly. We're supposed to accept that the remaining redactions are justified. We're supposed to trust that the government is striking the right balance between transparency and protection. Given the track record, that trust seems misplaced. What the public never hears about is what happens behind those closed doors. The judges who review unredacted files aren't just reading documents. They're building mental maps of connections and relationships. They're identifying patterns and inconsistencies. They're asking questions that the rest of us don't even know exist. And every now and then, something they see triggers an investigation. a referral to prosecutors, a sealed indictment, a quiet plea deal that never makes the front page. That's how the system works. Not through dramatic courtroom battles and sensational headlines, though those certainly happen, but through the slow, methodical work of people reading documents in quiet rooms and connecting dots that the public can't see. The fact that 2 members of Congress publicly stated that at least half a dozen powerful men are being protected by over-redactions is not just a casual observation. It's a warning. These are not people who are known for conspiratorial thinking or sensationalism. Massey is a libertarian-leaning Republican who has been skeptical of government overreach for his entire career. Khanna is a progressive Democrat who is focused on technology policy and economic justice. They don't have a history of collaborating on explosive revelations. They're not in the business of manufacturing scandals. But when they sat down together and reviewed the same documents, they came to the same conclusion. The public is being played. Powerful people are being protected. And the gap between what the government knows and what the public knows is growing wider by the day. The Trump angle is the one that captures the most attention, and for good reason. The former president's name appears throughout these files. He had a relationship with Epstein, one that he's characterized in various ways over the years. His associates and business partners were part of Epstein's world. The accusations against him, whether true or false, are part of the public record in these documents. And the Justice Department's own press release acknowledges that these accusations exist, even as it tries to dismiss them as sensationalist. This is a delicate position for Trump and his legal team, because even if every accusation is false, the fact that judges are reviewing them means they're being considered by people with the power to act. The fact that investigators are aware of them means they're being factored into ongoing assessments of legal exposure. And let's be honest about something. When a federal judge is reviewing unredacted files that mention your name, when prosecutors are analyzing connections between you and a known sex trafficker, when members of Congress are hinting that powerful people are being protected, you don't get to pretend that everything is fine. You don't get to dismiss it as just another witch hunt. You have to take it seriously, because in the legal system, it's not public opinion that matters. It's what the judge knows. It's what the prosecutor can prove. It's what the jury will see. And right now, we don't know what the judges are seeing. We don't know what the prosecutors are building. We don't know what evidence exists that could be used in a future case against Trump or anyone else. That's the uncertainty that keeps powerful people up at night. That's the uncertainty that drives them to hire the best lawyers money can buy. That's the uncertainty that makes this story more than just another news cycle. The timeline of this story matters. The Justice Department has been under pressure for years to release more Epstein files. They've fought against transparency at every turn. They've delayed, obstructed, and obfuscated, and now, when they finally release millions of pages, they're still redacting crucial information, they're still protecting powerful names, they're still creating more questions than answers. Judge Berman had to force them to fix obvious errors. Congress has demanded more transparency. Victims have protested the mishandling of their information. And the DOJ has responded with more documents and more redactions and more confusion. The pattern is clear. The resistance to real transparency is deep and entrenched. It's going to take sustained pressure from multiple directions to pry open the secrets that are being kept. The question that everyone wants answered is whether any of this will lead to criminal charges, against Trump or against anyone else in the Epstein network. The honest answer is that we don't know. Nobody outside the secure rooms knows. Nobody reviewing the redacted versions knows. The only people who know are the judges and the prosecutors and the lawmakers who have seen the unredacted files. And they're not talking. They can't talk. The law restricts them from revealing classified or sealed information. So we're left to wonder. We're left to speculate. We're left to parse every public statement for hidden meaning. And that's where the danger lies. Because when the information vacuum exists, people fill it with their own theories. And some of those theories will be wrong, but some of them will be right. And we have no way of knowing which is which. The broader context of the Epstein case itself is crucial to understanding why this matters. Jeffrey Epstein was not just a billionaire with private jets and a taste for young girls. He was a criminal who operated with impunity for decades. He was protected by powerful people. He had lawyers who knew exactly what he was doing and helped him get away with it for years. He had connections to politicians, businessmen, royalty, and celebrities. And when he was finally arrested and charged, he died under suspicious circumstances in a federal jail cell. Those are the facts. Those are the known, established, documented facts of the case. And they point to a network of influence that extends far beyond one man. They point to a system that allowed Epstein to continue his crimes for years because he was connected to powerful people who could protect him. They point to a corruption of justice that is still being unraveled. The role of the public in all of this is both frustrating and essential. Frustrating because the public is being kept in the dark. Essential because the public is the only force that can demand accountability. When voters start asking hard questions, when journalists start digging deeper, when members of Congress start feeling pressure from their constituents, that's when things start to move. That's how Judge Berman ended up forcing the DOJ to fix its redaction problems. Not because the DOJ wanted to fix them, but because the pressure became too much to ignore. Not because the system works perfectly, but because public outrage can sometimes overcome institutional inertia. Not because transparency is a priority for the government, but because secrecy eventually becomes unsustainable when enough people demand answers. The same dynamic applies to the larger questions about Trump and the Epstein files. If the public loses interest, if the story fades from the headlines, if people move on to the next scandal, then the pressure will ease. The DOJ will continue to release redacted documents. The powerful names will stay hidden. The questions will go unanswered. But if the public stays engaged, if the pressure remains high, if people keep demanding answers, then the system might be forced to respond. Judges might require more transparency. Congress might launch new investigations. Prosecutors might feel compelled to act on what they've found. That's how accountability works. Not through the goodness of the government's heart, but through the relentless pressure of an informed and angry public. There's a warning embedded in all of this that goes beyond Trump and Epstein. The United States is supposed to be a democracy where the government is accountable to the people, where transparency is the default and secrecy requires justification, where powerful people can't hide behind redacted documents and classified files. But increasingly, that's not the reality. Increasingly, the government operates in a fog of classification and national security and victim protection that obscures more than it illuminates. Increasingly, we're told to trust the system without being shown the evidence that would justify that trust. And when members of Congress start hinting that powerful people are being protected, when judges have to force the DOJ to do its job, when millions of pages of documents are released with a vague disclaimer about sensationalist claims, the trust becomes harder and harder to maintain. The prison alert angle is what grabs attention, and that's understandable. The idea of a former president facing criminal exposure is dramatic. It's unprecedented. It's the kind of thing that makes headlines around the world. But the deeper issue is what the Epstein files represent. A test of whether the American legal system can hold powerful people accountable. A test of whether the government can be trusted to manage information honestly. A test of whether the public will accept being kept in the dark while the powerful are protected. Those are the stakes, and they're much larger than one person or one document release. So where does this leave us? It leaves us in the uncomfortable position of not knowing. Not knowing what the judges have seen, not knowing what the prosecutors are building, not knowing who the half-dozen powerful men are that Massey and Khanna referenced, not knowing whether any of the accusations against Trump are true or false or something in between, not knowing whether criminal charges will ever materialize. That uncertainty is exactly the point. That uncertainty is the reason powerful people can sleep at night even when their names are in the files, because the system protects them. The black bars protect them. The delays and obfuscations and classifications protect them. And the public, with its short attention span and its endless distractions, mostly lets them get away with it. But not this time. Or at least, not completely this time. The story is still moving. The pressure is still building. The judges are still reviewing. The investigators are still analyzing. The lawmakers are still speaking out. And the public is still paying attention. That doesn't guarantee accountability, but it creates the possibility of accountability. It opens the door to consequences that might otherwise never materialize. It keeps the pressure on the system and the people who run it. And sometimes, when the pressure is high enough and sustained long enough, things actually change. People actually face consequences. Names actually get released. Justice actually happens. Not always, not often, but sometimes. That's what we're hoping for. That's what we're watching for. That's what makes this story worth following. The Epstein files are not the first time the public has been given a partial picture of a criminal network involving powerful people. They won't be the last, but they represent an important moment. A moment when the system is being tested. A moment when the government is being forced to choose between transparency and secrecy. A moment when the public has a chance to demand answers and hold people accountable. Whether that moment will lead to real consequences remains to be seen. But one thing is clear. The story is far from over. The names are still being protected. The redactions are still in place. And the powerful people who appear in those files are still hoping that everyone will just move on to the next news cycle. They're hoping the attention will fade and the pressure will ease and their names will stay hidden. They're hoping the system will protect them one more time. They're hoping we'll forget. But we won't. Not this time. Because when two members of Congress from different parties stand up and say that powerful people are being protected, it's time to pay attention. When a federal judge publicly forces the DOJ to fix its redaction errors, it's time to pay attention. When millions of pages of documents are released with a vague warning about sensationalist claims, it's time to pay attention. And when the most powerful political figure in the country is mentioned in those documents, facing accusations that the government admits exist, even as it dismisses them, it's definitely time to pay attention. This is not just about Trump. It's about the system that protects powerful people. It's about the gap between what judges know and what we know. It's about the redactions that hide more than they reveal. It's about accountability and whether it applies to everyone equally or just to those without the power to fight back. Those are the questions that matter. Those are the questions that need answers. And those are the questions that the Epstein files, in their unredacted truth, might finally help answer. The prison alert is not a prediction. It's a warning that the machinery of justice is turning, that powerful people are being scrutinized, that the secrets are slowly being uncovered. And when the truth finally comes out, no amount of black bars or vague disclaimers will be able to protect the people who have been hiding behind them.